Hello and welcome. This is the news on NTA International. I am Stella Inamiti and the sign language interpreter is Ada Uno. Now the headlines. African and global leaders meet in Nairobi, Kenya, advocating urgent reforms to global financial system and stronger investment partnerships for Africa. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer faces growing call to quit after almost 80 lawmakers from his governing centre-left Labour Party canvass his resignation. Plus, Uganda's 81-year-old President Yoweri Museveni has been sworn into an 8th term in office. Thanks for joining us. In the best manner and loudest voice they can, African countries are demanding a new world order in investment financing and partnerships with willing developed countries, declaring that the continent is ready to build its development with the resources and talents in the region. State House correspondent Musbah Dan Wahab reports that this is central goal of the Africa Forward Summit 2026 under the theme Africa-France Partnerships for Innovation and Growth.
Jomo Kenyatta, first Kenyan president, dropped some words on the marble. Part of them, and I quote, "Our children may learn about heroes of the past. Our task is to make ourselves architects of the future." End of quote. President Bola Tinubu was at the Kenyatta International Convention Center as Africa took a major step towards the future they want. Many other leaders on the continent also approved of the decision with their presence. 54 countries on the continent, with the youngest population in the world, enormous resources and fertile land, world-class entrepreneurs and the required markets. African countries are saying enough of dependency on developed countries for development. Co-organizer President William Ruto, who spoke for the continent, says what Africa requires now is no longer charity, but partnerships and investments in a dignified manner for mutual benefit.
We must confront with honesty and urgency the question of how Africa finances its own transformation. The era in which Africa's development was principally framed through aid, dependency, and unsustainable borrowing must give way to a new paradigm grounded in investment, innovation, domestic resource mobilization, and strategic partnerships built on quality and mutual benefit. What Africa requires today, friends, is not charity, but investments. Not extraction, but value creation. Not dependency, but mutually beneficial partnerships capable of unlocking shared prosperity.
The demand for Africa representation in the United Nations Security Council has lingered for long, and President Ruto is rooting for this again.
No global governance architecture can credibly claim to be democratic, to be representative, to be just, or fit for purpose, while a substantial part of humanity remains absent from the table where the world's most consequential decisions are made.
With an earlier announcement of a $27 billion investment in the continent at this summit, President Emmanuel Macron is presenting France as a dependable ally, ready for a mutually respectful and beneficial relationship.
So what we need to do is look at the partnership that we want together through a logic of investment. And this is where we see this agenda of prosperity and sovereignty altogether. Getting Africa forward on the economic level means greater sovereignty and autonomy. It's important for Europeans as well.
Like an idea of whose time has come, this registers as a new beginning in the Africa-France partnership, beginnings of a renewed relationship are much expected. From Nairobi, Musbal and Wahab, NC News.
Meanwhile, African and global leaders meeting in Nairobi, Kenya, are calling for urgent reforms to the global financial system and stronger investment partnerships for Africa. The summit comes amid shifting geopolitical alliances and growing demands for Africa to be treated as equal partner in global development. Justin Ben Unyi reports.
Kenyan President William Ruto, French President Emmanuel Macron, and United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres joined other leaders at the Africa Forward Summit in Nairobi to discuss Africa's economic future and reforms to the global financial system. President Ruto urged African nations to move beyond aid dependency and unsustainable debt, stressing the continent needs investment-driven growth and mutually beneficial partnerships. He said Africa should not be seen as a burden, but as part of solution to global challenges, while criticizing unfair borrowing costs and inequalities within the international financial system.
What Africa requires today, friends, is not charity, but investments. Not extraction, but value creation. Not dependency, but mutually beneficial partnerships capable of unlocking shared prosperity. That is the essence of the Africa Forward Summit. It is about recalibrating Africa's place in the global order. It is about redefining engagements with Africa, including with long-standing partners such as France, away from outdated models of aid and asymmetrical dependency towards a framework anchored on investment, enterprise, innovation, industrialization, and mutually beneficial cooperation.
French President Emmanuel Macron announced billions of dollars in investment commitments for Africa, while admitting that the era of Europe dictating Africa's future is over. Macron said Africa must no longer be viewed merely as a source of raw materials, but as a strategic partner in global development.
But let us be honest about what stands in Africa's way. A global system designed without Africa and still largely operating without Africa, perpetuating century-old injustices. A continent of more than 1.5 billion people with no permanent seats on the UN Security Council, as was referred by President William Ruto. Without the voice, the representation and decision-making power it deserves inside the international financial institutions that shape this economy, it's not Africa that loses, it's the world that loses, the fact that the voice of Africa is not conveniently taken into account.
However, the absence of Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger highlighted growing tensions between France and parts of the Sahel region following the withdrawal of French troops and the formation of the Alliance of Sahel States. The summit ended with renewed calls for fairer financial systems, stronger economic cooperation and African-led development capable of transforming the continent's future. Justin Bemunyi, NTA News.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is fighting to save his premiership after almost 80 lawmakers from his governing centre-left Labour Party calling for him to resign or set a timetable for his departure. Starmer defied calls to quit, telling his cabinet that he will get on with governing. The report.
Ministers West Streeting, Ed Miliband and Hilary Benn have left 10 Downing Street as Prime Minister Keir Starmer tells his top team he is getting on with governance, defying mounting calls from ministers and MPs to step down. The Labour Premier also dared any leadership to challenge him after Miata Fombole became the first junior minister to resign, demanding that he plan his departure. The Labour Party has a process for challenging a leader, and that has not been triggered. He added, "The country expects us to get on with governance, and that is what I am doing and what we must do as a cabinet." On what has become the most crucial day yet of his almost 2-year-old premiership. More than 70 of Labour's 403 members of parliament have now called for Starmer to quit immediately or to set out a timetable for his resignation. Starmer's vow Monday to fight on and prove his doubters wrong did little to calm clamour for his removal. However, the pressure on Starmer has been soaring since Labour suffered disastrous local election results last week, losing hundreds of councillors to the hard-right Reform UK party and left-wing populist Greens. Labour has lost its country-old dominance in Wales and were hammered by the Scottish National Party in the Parliament in Edinburgh. The results added to a miserable few months for Starmer, who has been engulfed in scandal over his decision to appoint and then sack Peter Mandelson as ambassador to Washington.
Museveni has been sworn in to an 8th term, but speculation are already growing about who will replace him, just as Bahamians headed to the polls on Tuesday to decide whether to grant Prime Minister Philip Davis and his ruling Progressive Liberal Party a second consecutive term, a feat no leader has accomplished in nearly 30 years. The report.
President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda has been in power for 40 years. The 81-year-old was sworn in Tuesday to extend his presidency over a further 5-year term that may well be his last, although not necessarily the last for the Museveni family. The president's son and speculative heir, Army Chief General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, oversaw days-long rehearsals of the military parade that will animate the 8th inauguration of Museveni, with a Russian-made Sukhoi fighter jet flying over official ceremonial grounds in Kampala, the Ugandan capital. Museveni took the oath of office and received the ceremonial instruments of power while being cheered by thousands attending the event in Kampala suburb of Kololo. Many Ugandans now accept that Museveni's presidency, the only one that millions of people have known, is nearing its end. What remains uncertain is the nature of the transition and how orderly things will be in the time he has left in office. Kainerugaba looks poised to take over. He has declared his wish to succeed his father and said recently that the mission is unstoppable. Still, his path is narrow and could follow one of two ways, either a bloodless but unconstitutional takeover by Kainerugaba or a constitutional amendment that allows lawmakers with the ruling party. In another news, polls open across the archipelago as voters weigh concerns about affordability and housing against the government's record. The election, which was not due until October, was called early by Davis. An official in his office stated the decision was made to hold the vote to get ahead of the upcoming Atlantic hurricane season. The previous election in September 2021, which brought Davis to power, was also a snap election. At stake are 41 seats in the Bahamian House of Assembly. This represents an increase of 2 seats from the last election, following recommendations from the Independent Constituencies Commission to add 2 new seats. The PLP, which held a strong majority with 32 of 39 seats heading into Tuesday's vote, is campaigning to build on its mandate, while the FNM seeks to return to power after its 2021 defeat. Key issues dominating the campaign are the rising cost of living, stagnant wages, and a persistent housing shortage. The International Monetary Fund noted these challenges in 2025 report, acknowledging government's effort on housing while suggesting more public spending could be necessary. Months ahead of the election, Davis took steps to remove value-added tax from food sold in grocery stores, a move the opposition said will have little impact on Bahamians.
The honesty of the record.
Iran's representative to the United Nations says his country had the inalienable right to develop nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. This was during the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons Conference in New York. The report.
I'd like to echo non-nuclear weapon states who emphasized on recognition of the peaceful users, the right to peaceful users as inalienable.
In his talks to defend his country, Iran representative said, and I quote, "I would like to echo non-nuclear weapon states, which emphasized on recognition of the peaceful users, as we have expressed before. Nothing should restrict their rights to peaceful users and participation in international cooperation without any discrimination." The event, held every 5 years, discusses the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons in the context of global nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation and peaceful nuclear energy use. It comes following the conflict with the US and Israel. Trump's administration has insisted Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, while Tehran has always argued that its nuclear program is peaceful.
You're watching the news on NT International. It's time for a short break and we'll be back with more reports. Thanks for staying. The federal government says it is deliberately deepening activities in the non-oil sector to fully maximize and boost the nation's economic and cultural potentials. This is from the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, while receiving the editorial team of a book written on the economic potentials of Nigeria. We'll bring you details of this report in our subsequent bulletins. Moving on, for millions of Africans already struggling with floods, drought and rising food prices, climate change is no longer a distant conversation but a daily reality. Experts are now pushing for innovative climate financing to help vulnerable communities survive and thrive. That formed the focus of a dialogue organized by the Resource and Environment Policy Research Center, alongside Environment for Development Nigeria and the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Mina Daniels reports.
From farmers battling unpredictable rainfall to families displaced by flooding, the human cost of climate change continues to grow across Africa. At the Policy Dialogue on Innovative Climate Finance, stakeholders say the challenge is no longer whether climate change exists, but how African communities can access the funding needed to adapt and rebuild livelihoods.
The collapse of our ecosystem due to climate change are all factors that bring down even our development, even our standard of living. Because when the environment is compromised, the health of the population is also compromised.
Participants stress that many local communities contributing little to global emissions are paying the highest price.
There have been a lot of promises about climate finance, and it's not coming, and we all can testify. So we need to look inwards. We need to begin to think about how do we do this.
The event called for financing models that directly support ordinary people through renewable energy projects, climate-smart agriculture, and resilient infrastructure.
Here are the human capital, here are the resources, here are the companies, here are the legislative power, and we really need to turn every stone out to see how can we use all these resources in the best possible way.
For the organizers, the conversation is about more than economics. It is about justice, survival, and giving vulnerable Africans a fair chance in a changing climate. In Abuja, Mina Daniels, NTA News.
Every year on Florence Nightingale's birthday, the world appreciates the nurses who keep health systems alive. But in Nigeria, the National Association of Nigerian Nurses and Midwives says enough with the applause without urgent action on pay, safety, and working conditions. Uche Ugochukwu tells us more on the day with the theme, Our Nurses, Our Future. Empowered nurses save lives.
Records show that more than 57,000 Nigerian nurses have migrated abroad in the last 5 years, with 16,000 leaving for the UK alone in 2025. The question is, why are they leaving?
What we need is good welfare, good working condition, good environment, good equipment to work with.
Aside the equipment, the shortage is there.
Also, it is telling on us because we don't have the ratio of nurses per patient yet as according to World Health Organization standard.
They are the first to arrive and the last to leave a patient's bedside. Yet, they lament they face poor pay, unsafe working conditions, stalled promotions, and the constant threat of insecurity. This year's theme emphasizes empowerment as a key safety strategy to enable nurses do their jobs effectively.
For nurses to maximize their life-saving impact, they must have the authority and the resources to deliver high-quality, person-centered primary care.
They are calling on the government and other stakeholders to act now before the country loses the skilled professionals it needs to make its health system work. As Nigeria's nurses celebrate their day this year, there is growing concern that many will not be here to celebrate it next year. Uche Ugochukwu, NTA News.
In the build-up to the 2027 general election, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has continued to garner support and endorsement on his re-election bid. Aliu Tijani reports that a mega rally to mobilize grassroots support for the president was held in Akwanga, Nasarawa State.
The rally draws hundreds of party faithfuls, youth groups, women associations, and community leaders from across the state. A demonstration of grassroots ownership with a clear message of continuity, conveyed by the APC governorship aspirant, Zaka Yakubu. The people of Nasarawa State say President Bola Tinubu's economic reforms, though tough at the beginning, are laying the foundation for a long-time national prosperity. Speakers described the removal of fuel subsidy among reforms as bold decisions that ended decades of waste and redirected resources to critical sectors of the economy, but however, tasked governors to use the funds judiciously for the benefit of the masses.
Asiwaju has improved our allocation because today they share up to 2.2 trillion as against the 700 billion we were sharing during Buhari.
Community representative pledged to sustain mobilization efforts across wards and local governments, insisting that continued support for the Tinubu administration will guarantee policy stability and national growth.
The situation we met at hand was not caused by Tinubu. If you remove Tinubu today, the next leadership will face the same thing.
The rally also declared support for the governorship aspiration of Zaka Yakubu in the state ahead of the party primaries. From Akwanga, Aliu Tijani, NTA News.
And similarly, the North Central Youth Support Group for Tinubu Kwara State Chapter Executives have been inaugurated with a charge to mobilize Kwarans to vote for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in the 2027 presidential election. Aisha Abubakar Yahya reports that the inauguration was attended by youths from the 16 local government areas of the state.
The youths, drawn from the 16 local government areas of Kwara State, converged on the Mandate Hall, Adeta, with a common goal of ensuring the re-election of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in 2027. In his message at the inauguration, the Director General of the North Central Youth Support Group for Tinubu, Comrade Abdullahi Muhammad Jamil, commended the enthusiasm of Kwara youths towards ensuring the return of the president. He noted that the support group is committed to supporting President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's renewed hope agenda, stressing that the group believes in the president's vision for a better Nigeria where the youths drive progress and prosperity.
Today, we inaugurate our Kwara, taking initiative to the heart of Kwara State. We mobilize, sensitize, campaign, educate people across Kwara State to support the elections of our dear president, the new hope agenda president Bola Ahmed Tinubu, come 2027.
To every question today, I say this, your voice matters, your vote counts, and your government can shape the direction of our nation.
The Director General of the North Central Youth Support Group for Tinubu Kwara 2027, Comrade Abdullahi Muhammad Jamil, thereafter presented letters of appointment to the state executives and also led them in the oath-taking ceremony. Aisha Abubakar Yahaya, NTA News.
The Sultan of Sokoto and President General of the Nigerian Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, Alhaji Muhammad Sa'ad Abubakar, has congratulated elder statesman and leader of Afenifere, Chief Reuben Famuyide Fashoranti, on the occasion of his 100th birthday, describing him as a pride of Nigeria and national asset whose contributions to nation building remain invaluable. In a statement released, the Sultan noted that Pa Fashoranti's remarkable longevity and enduring relevance across different phases of Nigeria's political history before, during and after the era of the late Chief Obafemi Awolowo stand as a testament to a life of exemplary service and leadership. The Sultan praised the centenarian statesman for his immense contributions to education, governance and national development, particularly highlighting his pioneering role as first principal of Anglican Grammar School Iju to Ogbolu in Akure North in 1957, as well as his service as Commissioner for Finance in the administration of the late Chief Michael Adekunle Ajasin in the old Ondo State. According to the Sultan, Chief Reuben Fashoranti has served Nigeria with distinction and dedication, having contributed immensely to the greatness of this country. It is only fitting that Nigeria continues to honor and celebrate him as one of its most distinguished elder statesmen. We'll take a look at the weather outlook. And that's the news on NTA International. Thanks for being a part of it. I am Stella Inameti, and my sign language interpreter is Ada Uno.